All right, this video is for everybody who owns a reverse osmosis system, and primarily for people who own Flow Red or Flow. And I want to discuss with you very quickly the whole summary of the fluid dynamics, because everything's changed since we went to hydroblade, cannons, whatever form of rinse bar that you're trying to think of. Because originally, reverse osmosis systems were just feeding 2 jets or 4 jets, and now in a constructor brush, you'll find that there's 34 jets in a 12-inch, 47 jets in a 16-inch, like that. So that's something which we're addressing this year, basically that difference between the 12 and the 16, but that's not available yet. But I want all of the constructor brushes and all of the window weapons to be balanced, so if you can get the fluid dynamics right for one, you've got it right for all. So let's talk about the start to the finish, and what are we trying to achieve, what's causing what to happen if you end up with what you'd call low flow or low pressure at the brush, and then what you can do about it. And then this video will then go into our media department, and we'll make another video with illustrations and diagrams and little bits of video and stuff like that, so you can actually see how to do it. Okay, so this is just basically the theory. Okay, so as soon as you go from DI to RO, knowing that DI does not use water pressure to filter the water, and the reason you want RO to filter the water before DI is to save money, right? Because you can use water pressure to filter water with an RO, and that then means that you don't need to use anywhere near as much DI. Maybe you can save 90 to 95% if you buy your RO from a company that doesn't sell you proprietary sediment, carbon, and DI resin filters, because those proprietary filters kind of they take back a lot of the savings that you could have made by just using an RO. So Flow Red uses non-proprietary sediment carbon filters, non-proprietary DI. You can just buy it in bulk and fill it up, and we will have refills, but they'll still not be overpriced. Okay, so reverse osmosis membrane relies on a pressure differential across the membrane to filter the water. So we're going to put a whole lot of water under pressure in on one side, and the membrane itself is like a great big bag, and it's got tiny little holes. And what happens is that water clusters around minerals, so that when they cluster around a mineral, they won't get through these holes, and they'll go straight through out the waste pipe. And the water molecules that are pure, let's say, then they're the ones which get through these tiny little holes. So if you don't have enough water pressure, let's say at your brush, what it means is there's not enough pressure differential across the membrane. Yeah. So if what we want to say was, how can we increase this pressure differential across the membrane? Well, we can boost the pressure going in, and that's where you have booster pumps, things like that. Or we can reduce the back pressure on the other end. So what is the back pressure? Well, the back pressure is created by reducing the number of jets or reducing the orifice of the jets, and then that will create a back pressure. And then we're creating back pressure by using tubing and hoses, right? It's called wall friction. So that's creating a back pressure. And then we've got back pressure coming from gravity, 5 psi per 10 feet or per floor of a building. Then all of this is back pressure, and that back pressure is coming against the pressure that you've got coming in, and if they equalize, then you've got zero flow. So the more back pressure you've got, the less flow rate you're going to get out of your reverse osmosis membrane. And also we've got the problem with water temperature, is that the performance of reverse osmosis membrane when the water temperature is 75 degrees Fahrenheit or 25 degrees Celsius is double than if the water is at 39 degrees Fahrenheit or about 4 or 5 degrees centigrade. Okay, so water temperature, the spring is difficult to get the best performance out of an RO because the ground is freezing. Even if the ambient temperature is lovely, it's the groundwater temperature that's driving the temperature of the water that's coming into your RO. All right, so boosting is easy, right? You go and buy a booster pump. We recommend the Wayne PC4 and the Liberty 331 as easy to buy, low cost pumps, but you can get Marathon with Fluid Tech systems, and they'd be $600, $700, $800, something like that. So it's a superior solution, but it's also a really expensive solution for not much gain, right? There is a gain, but not much gain. Okay, now what I want to do is focus what's happening on the other end, right? The easiest way to maximize the performance out of an RO is actually to drop all that water into a tank. So you've got maximum pressure before, zero pressure afterwards. You just drop it into a tank, and now you get a 12-volt pump called a delivery pump, and you dedicate that 12-volt pump to pushing the water through your hose, your tube, up against gravity and out the brush. Okay, now the pressure rating on a pump, you might see the pump is rated at 60 psi, 80 psi, 100 psi. That's not the amount of pressure it's pushing through your lines. The amount of pressure is actually the flow rate, the flow rating on the pump. So what you want is 1.5 gallons per minute is the ideal size, right? And so now we're going to try and push 1.5 gallons per minute into the front of the hose tube, up the pole and out the brush. And what we actually need is something less than half a gallon per minute to come out of the brush, gallon per minute. So then you've got 1.5 going in, half coming out, and the difference is being lost on the way through, right? So every length of hose is going to reduce the available pressure at the brush, and the smaller the hose, the more it will reduce it. So it's cumulative. The longer the hose, the smaller the hose or the tube, the less pressure you're going to end up with at the brush. So if you're going to shorten your tubes, then you'll shorten your thinnest tube as much as possible, the length of it, right? Maybe even eliminate it, where that's where we've got on some of our brushes now, we're saying don't use Rhino tube, right? Go to Rhino high flow and take that all the way to the brush. And that'll deliver a lot of water to the brush. Yeah, much more, double the water to the brush, right? So step one, shorten hose and tubes, right? And that will give you, all of a sudden, the jets, instead of squirting this far, will squirt this far, right? That's the first thing that you should look at. Secondly, we can use smaller jets, obviously, but then you have to change out your jets on your brushes. That's not the ideal way. You can have less jets. So you could, again, these are not ideal, but they show you what you can do. You can go from a 16-inch brush with 47 jets to a 12-inch brush with 34 jets. That will give you like a 50% increase in the distance that the water squirts if the jets are the same size in each brush. You could close every second jet off, and that would give you double the distance that the water will squirt out of the brush. Right. One of the things I want to just cover is that don't split from one pump and run two poles, because then the water is going to find the path of least resistance, and then you're going to have to balance these two systems, which is a pain. You should have one pump dedicated to each pole, each operator, okay? Now, how do you test your system? Let's say I haven't got enough pressure, and then what's going wrong, and what's my problem, and all that sort of thing. Okay, the answer to that is to grab your constructor brush and just a short piece of tube, maybe less than a foot, put a Gardena fitting on it with a push fit, and then take that right back to your spigot or your tap and connect it, and you'll see the water squirts like blah so far, right? Then put it just after your flow red or your RO system, right? And then measure as it comes out of the pure water out, measure the distance that it's squirting there. Then if you're going to run some sort of garden hose or whatever, then have a look at what it behaves like at the end of that hose. Then if you're going to run high flow, what does it behave like at the end of high flow? If you're going to run Rhino tube, what is it doing at the end of the Rhino tube? And then you'll see the pressure being stolen by the fluid dynamic system that you've installed after your flow red. What flow red is trying to do is produce you very low cost pure water that under normal conditions will let you clean to 2 stories without using a pump, and under good conditions, because what we can't do is we can't control the available water pressure at a spigot. You might have water pressure as low as 30 psi, and we've come across guys that have blown up Rhino hose, with pressure coming out of a spigot at 120 psi, right? So we can't control. You've got to balance this off, right? You've got to have this knowledge and this understanding, and say, okay, I have low pressure. That's why we give you a pressure gauge and a temperature gauge on flow red. Right? You can turn the system off and get the static pressure, and you're going to go, oh, I am going to need a booster pump here, right? Or I'm going to have to use a buffer tank with a delivery pump. Or I'm going to have to get this unit closer to the work using a garden hose to feed the water to the flow red, get it closer to the work so I've got shorter tubes, hoses afterwards, okay? Or I can't run a 16-inch brush on this job. I'm going to have to use a 12-inch brush because I just don't have the available pressure to filter the water and get the right amount of squirt out of 47 jets. Does that make sense? Okay, so there's loads to know, and it's worth knowing it because there's money in glass if you clean it fast, right, and you use more water, you'll use less time. So you want a lot of water for rinse, and what we can do is we can deliver you a very efficient, FlowRed is a very efficient water filtration system with loads of water, you know, based on the available conditions, loads of water coming through to Pure, with the intention of driving 34 jets. That's its, you know, it's designed to suit Hydroblade rinse bar technology. However, what we can't, there's so many variables that we can't control. We can't control which hose you use, which tube you use, how long those hoses and tubes are. We can't control what's the temperature of the water, and we can't control the pressure at the spigot. All of those things you have to be able to take into consideration. You have to know and understand what I'm saying here, or you go back to 2 pencil jets or 4 pencil jets as the last resort, right? Because basically any RO has got enough pressure to drive 2 pencil jets, right? But that's not our intention. We want you cleaning windows faster, better, safer. We already understand and understood that we have to educate a whole lot of new information, you know, with the technology that we've developed, and it takes a little bit of time for us to be able to articulate, you know, so much content, right? And then be able to deliver it to you in a way that you can understand it, you know, in a sequential sense, okay? So if you have any questions after you listen to this video, please feel free to either direct message me or Dante or any of the team, or you can make it in a comment below this in the thread, because that would help a lot of other people as well. There's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot of discernment, there's a lot of just, you know, how do I get this clear? What should I do? You know, should I use Rhino tubes? or whatever, you know, and it doesn't matter if you're not a Reach It customer. I mean, this is, when we put a video up, we put it up to educate the industry. And then of course we hope that somewhere along the line you would choose a Reach It product, but that's not our drive. I mean, this is about fluid dynamics with reverse osmosis membranes. Okay, so feel free, if you've got a different system, feel free to make a comment. We don't allow for negativity to be driving or, you know, bagging out another product. We can talk about, you know, differences, but we're not going to be bagging them out. So, you know, if you just want to use our education, you know, that's fine. It's, you know, we're committed to the industry, and if you're in the industry, then we're committed to you. Okay, all right, let's get you cleaning windows faster, better, safer. Faster, better, safer.